Tough It Man! Alright, it's the HAWK all night, all day. I hope you enjoyed the last video. It's just a bit of fun doing something a bit different for a change and actually meeting people. Check that one out if you haven't already done so. You probably don't need to be an All Elite Wrestling fan to get a kick out of that video.
Who's got a bag?
But today, it's an episode of Was It Any Good? The show where we watch back a storyline segment by segment with the end goal of letting you know if it was any good. I was a big fan of Rikishi, mostly his moveset. It was fun watching him destroy guys. So when they tried to make him into a main eventer in the year 2000, it seemed plausible. He was getting great crowd reactions and he had the size to hang with the main eventers. It wasn't the worst idea ever, but will the execution of this be? Because I've heard so much negative stuff about it. So, Rikishi, Badman. Was it really that bad, man? It all started when Stone Cold Steve Austin was run over in a car park at Survivor Series 1999. Austin eventually returned from his injury and was looking for answers, and Mick Foley seemingly had those answers. Completely out of the blue, Mick Foley accused Rikishi of being the guilty party. The proof Foley had against Rikishi was that he was seen backstage the night of Survivor Series, even though he hadn't actually debuted yet as Rikishi, and also that the car had been set up for a really fat man to sit inside. Foley accuses Rikishi as the crowd make confused noises. Nobody saw this one coming. Rikishi admits to being guilty straight away to very loud boos. He didn't do it for him though. Oh no. He did it for The Rock. What is the point in giving him this massive storyline if straight away he's playing second fiddle to someone who's already established and doesn't need anything? It's then turned into a race angle as Rikishi claims Samoan wrestlers have always been held back. Certainly not the case anymore. Maybe Rikishi really did make a difference with this storyline. So Kisha's whole reason for running over Stone Cold was so The Rock could move up the card. It's the longest Rikishi promo I've ever heard, but it's pretty monotone and repetitive. He continues being overshadowed on the following SmackDown when Rock is the one who's interviewed for 10 minutes about the situation, with The Rock constantly pointing out the logic holes in the story, that he was already a multi-time champion before Austin was even run over. Austin is handed a match against Rikishi at No Mercy where he'll be able to do anything he wants to him. It's hyped up that we won't have seen violence like this before in wrestling. Rikishi doesn't even appear on the following SmackDown. He does, however, appear on the following Raw. It's just an interview. He now has a new attire to make him a bit more thug-like. This is Rikishi Fatwear. I doubt they sold many tracksuits. Rikishi says that all the Samoans are proud of him, and then the interview instantly becomes about The Rock again. Rikishi says that The Rock secretly enjoyed him running over Austin. This interview just isn't good. Rikishi's stumbling over his sentences and you can hear people chanting boring in the background. He's this bad man, but he just doesn't seem to be intimidating. He's making threats to Stone Cold, but he can't even say it without stumbling over his words. Later in the night, Big Keish challenges Austin to meet him in the parking lot. It's just so Rikishi followed it by smashing up Austin's truck with a sledgehammer. Even the weakest geek in the world could do this unchallenged. It doesn't make Rikishi look like a bad man. It makes him look like a hooligan though. Rikishi's still running away from Austin at every opportunity. It's all a trick though, because Rikishi returns and it's just so he can sucker punch Jim Ross, who is Austin's best friend. And anyway, who does Rikishi think he is walking around with a sledgehammer? The f***ing game? So here we are at No Mercy 2000, the first pay-per-view of the Badman. It's a no-holds-barred match. That Samoan outfit just doesn't look right on an evil character. It's here that Rikishi debuts his new song, Badman. I really love this song, it's a low-key banger. It's good to listen to in the gym. And it's obviously where the name for this Rikishi gimmick came from. As Rikishi cuts a promo calling Austin scared, this is actually more like it. He sounds intense and he does feel hateable here. Rikishi claims he's done something to Austin before the match and he's not going to show up. Instead, Mick Foley the commissioner shows up. It's all pointless because moments later Austin drives into the building, so no idea what any of that was about and I don't think it was explained. This one's a good intense brawl and Austin really sells you on the hatred he has for Rikishi. But is it hard to take a guy wrestling in a thong as a bad man seriously? Anyway, Austin basically batters him. Watching this back, Rikishi actually got a lot more offense in than I remembered, but overall, it was one-sided. I just don't think this match did enough to establish Rikishi as a believable threat. Austin batters Rikishi into his truck and drives him away. He sets Rikishi down by a wall and looks to run him over. But police come and arrest Stone Cold, completely ruining this match. This was supposed to be an anything goes match. Why do police choose to show up here of all places? So ultimately, for a match that was billed as we won't have ever seen violence like this before, the match is a massive anticlimax with no winner, and it feels more like storyline build. Rikishi looks very weak and forgettable coming out of this one. He also turns up again later in the night, causing The Rock to lose his title. How is this supposed to help him? Despite all of that, he does get to open the following show of Raw, and the crowd are pretty hot for the angle. They're all over Big Quiche. Rikishi reveals he's now pressing charges against Austin and he's sitting in jail. But he moves on to talk about how sad he is about The Rock losing his WWF title. He says that we've lost the battle but we haven't lost the war, and he's going to help him get his title back. The Rock joins him in the ring as Rikishi apologises to him. The Rock doesn't accept it and says he wants nothing to do with Rikishi. Rikishi says in a geeky voice like Top 10 Wrestling that The Rock is hurting his feelings. The Rock tells him to wipe his 400-pound ass of his feelings. Constipation and fat dude jokes. Rikishi looks like he's about to cry. This is horrible. He just can't duel on the microphone with guys like Austin and The Rock. Rikishi says that whether The Rock likes it or not, he'll still be here for him. Sounds like a needy ex-girlfriend you just can't get rid of. The Rock gives him rock bottom. Not sure where this goes now. Michael Cole asks Rikishi why he's still around when nobody likes him. Over on SmackDown, Austin promises to not lay a hand on Rikishi unless he's provoked. He says he'll fight him in a steel cage match on Raw, only if they agree to lay off each other until then. Okay, that's something. Maybe Rikishi can redeem himself. Too Cool complained to Rikishi about running Stone Cold over. They are of course Rikishi's friends. They try to talk Rikishi down and they're worried about him. Quiche says he's a man and doesn't have fear in his eyes. He takes credit for Too Cool's popularity and gives them a dressing down. Nice intense promo. Foley decides to put them all in a handicap match against each other. It really feels like they're trying on this episode of SmackDown. Rikishi is the main character on this show. These promos are actually getting better too. The handicap match is also the main event of SmackDown. In the ultimate heel move, Rikishi refuses to take the worm. He beats Too Cool fairly convincingly. It's something that needed to happen if he was going to get more hatred from the crowd. Rikishi calls Austin out to the ring, but Austin is attacked by a mystery man. Rikishi is doing impressions from the Warriors and telling him to come out to play. The injured Stone Cold does make it out to play, where Rikishi kicks the hawk out of him. Finally, Rikishi looks like a threat. Just ignore the mystery wrench attack backstage beforehand and we're doing fine. Rikishi's still chasing after The Rock like a needy ex-girlfriend. He looks so confused and asks The Rock for help with Stone Cold in the cage match. Ugh, horrible. He's also really dumb because he still thinks The Rock wants his help. For some reason, the Raw cage match isn't the main event. It's the most competitive match so far, but ultimately, Rikishi loses. He really needed to win this one too. Couldn't you give him the win? It's only a match on Raw for God's sake. Surely these shows are supposed to be used to build people up. Rikishi takes his loss out on The Rock. He cuts a promo and says that he's been lying to everyone because The Rock knew all the time about him running over Austin. He says The Rock told him to do it. Bit weird, don't know what to think of that twist. This whole thing's a confusing mess. Why do other people have to be involved? Couldn't Rikishi just run over Austin because he wanted to do it for himself? Stone Cold is apparently a dumbass too and believes Rikishi. Why? Why would you believe the person who ran you over? Rikishi continues blaming The Rock without any evidence. He also says that The Rock turned his back on Rikishi because he was intimidated by what a big star Rikishi was becoming. Austin buys everything he says, because he's DTA I guess. The WWF seem completely against giving Rikishi any credible wins. Big Quiche also forms a sort of alliance with Perk Angle as they have a mutual hatred for Rock and Austin. Rikishi and Angle teamed up to take on Austin in a handicap match on Raw. Rikishi wanted to hit Austin with a sledgehammer, foreshadowing what was about to come. Angle and Rikishi weren't good enough to beat Austin in a handicap situation, and then Triple H appears and he smashes Austin with the sledgehammer. He gets on the microphone and reveals that in fact it was all him. He had been the one controlling Rikishi, and he had told him to do it, and it was not for The Rock. And just like that, any hope of Rikishi succeeding as a main eventer completely evaporated. It's not even been 2 months. They barely even tried. He didn't even have a proper pay-per-view match with Austin, and the only people he beat was Too Cool for God's sake. It sucks on Isiaki's ass. It sucked now, it sucked then, and it sucks forever. Rikishi says The Rock can never be his family because Triple H is his family. So obviously Triple H takes the feud with Austin, and Rikishi moves on to do a drive-by sledgehammer smash to The Rock. It looks so stupid. He also cuts an in-ring promo about The Rock. It's clear that Rikishi just doesn't have any good one-liners, catchphrases, or a good delivery. He sounds so monotone. He thanks the Radicals for helping him beat up The Rock. Badman just doesn't seem to be a bad enough man. To illustrate that point, Mick Foley has cops take Rikishi off SmackDown, and Rikishi just doesn't even try to fight them. He just puts his tail between his legs and leaves like a good boy. There's just no effort here to make him look dangerous. So what we get instead is a pay-per-view match with zero heat and a really poor storyline at Survivor Series 2000 between The Rock and Rikishi. Surprisingly, the crowd is hot for this one, and I actually found this one to be quite enjoyable, and it's probably the second best match of the pay-per-view. The live crowd are really into it. Of course, that credit soon gets taken away because Rikishi has to use a sledgehammer to keep reminding us that Triple H is more important than he is. Unfortunately, The Rock hit one people's elbow, and that was enough to beat Rikishi. I wasn't expecting Rikishi to beat The Rock, but man, did he need a win here. There's nothing left for him to do now, and a post-match attack from the big man isn't helping anyone. He can hit as many bonsai drops as he wants. He hits 4 of them, in case you were wondering. Despite hitting 4 bonsai drops, The Rock's just back on the next Raw and he's fine. They could have at least wrapped him in bandages to sell the attack, but that would be giving Rikishi too much credit, I guess. From here, Rikishi is just used as a sort of hired henchman for the Helmsley regime. He's still on the losing team all the time though. Rikishi faces The Rock again on Raw, and he loses by DQ in 2 minutes. Wow, and people why this failed so hard. You can count the amount of matches he's won on one ass cheek. Mick Foley sets up a match for the world title, and randomly, Rikishi's named as a challenger. This is a man who's won 1 match in 2 months against Scotty 2 Hotty and Grandmaster Sexay. In what world would he be a number 1 contender? Well, ask and you shall receive, because over on Raw before the title match we get a singles match and it's Rikishi versus the Dead Man in an opener. Rikishi actually beats The Undertaker 1-2-3. Just ignore the fact he had help. Never happened. No perk angle to be seen. No pills were popped on this episode of Raw. So it's the Armageddon Hell in a Cell 6-man match as they battle for the WWF title. Triple H, the Badman, Kurt Angle the champion, Undertaker, The Rock and Austin will fight for the belt. I am sorry, but one of these things does not quite feel like the others. During the match, Rikishi tries to hug Triple H, who promptly turns on him. Yup, he's still dumb. But at least Quiche would have a memorable moment on this show, finally. During the match, Vince tries to destroy the cage using a truck and the door from the cage is taken off. Rikishi manages to climb the cage, which is a feat in itself. But he needn't be worrying about how to get down again. Taker solves that for him. He destroys Rikishi with a push, which knocks him off the cage and onto the truck bed. A really cool moment of Rikishi's career that's often overlooked. You have to respect this very large man for taking that fall, it's very brave. Angle retains. After this, his main event run was pretty much over as Rikishi slipped further and further down the card. There was a very brief glimmer of hope when Rikishi won a fatal 4-way main event to become the final entrant in the Royal Rumble 2001, but the luckiest number to enter in Royal Rumble history was sadly not lucky for Rikishi. Haku debuted for the WWF and WWF decided to make him and Rikishi a tag team because they were both from the islands, I guess. The team was cut short though when Rikishi injured his eardrum. When he turned face, which went nowhere as Rikishi injured his shoulder against William Regal. He was forced to miss half a year in the entire invasion angle. When he returned from that injury, he eventually went back to teaming with Scotty 2 Hotty again, but the magic had gone and the damage was done. So it didn't really go well, did it? What I will say is I don't think any of this was actually Rikishi's fault. By today's standards, this would be fairly decent promo-wise, but Rikishi just couldn't hang with The Rock and Austin on the mic. Some of his promos were actually alright, just a bit apathetic. He was screwed by the storyline because it was stupid, and he was screwed even harder by how many losses he racked up. 2 wins during the entire main event run is just not good enough. I still think it's dumb that Triple H could take the credit for the entire running over Austin thing, despite not actually being the one that did it. Rikishi was just following orders. That didn't help anyone in the 40s, did it? So yeah, the bad man was bad, man. It was frustrating and a waste of time. But Rikishi himself, pretty blameless in my opinion. There was nothing he could do to help, and if you don't agree with that, I'll take your bitch and make a yelp.